right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Little Man, Big Conversations. Finally, am I right? Finally, we're back with this podcast. I want to thank you all for being so patient after these last couple of weeks. Had a little bit of a computer error, computer glitch there that happened out of nowhere. Had to take the computer into the shop, therefore, no podcast. But fear not, we are back and we are in business, and I appreciate you tuning in. Hey, before we get into today's episode, if you haven't done so already, please, by all means, go and follow, share, subscribe, all the cool, good things. On Facebook, Little Man, Big Conversations Podcast, and on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is LMBC Podcast, and on Twitter, LMBC_podcast. Hey, had to change it up. I want to take this time real quick to thank you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. A little bit of a bomb drop here, in the best way possible, if a bomb drop is ever a good thing, but hey, in this instant, let's pretend that it is. This podcast has been going on for close to maybe 12, 13 episodes thus far. You guys have tuned into the guests, you guys have tuned into my stories, all around. You guys are giving some solid feedback, you're enjoying it, which I highly appreciate. But, bit of a bomb drop. After the list of guests that I have revealed thus far in the trailer, if you haven't seen the trailer, please check out the Facebook and the Twitter. The trailer is on there. After the list of guests that will be interviewed on this podcast that have been revealed in that trailer, you will be getting a season 2 of LMBC Podcast. Yes, that's right. We're going to kick it off with a season 2. Hey, as a double reveal, double bomb drop, if you will. Ending of season 1. The guest I can reveal. The end of season 1 of this here podcast will be the heart and soul of IPW, Cruz. Big deal. Mr. Cruz does not speak hardly to anyone. Doesn't do any of the media, doesn't do any of the newspapers, doesn't do any of the internet. So it's a big deal to get Cruz on here, and man, we talked for a long, long time. I really appreciate his time and effort that he put in. He was able to have a nice heart-to-heart with the heart and soul. We talked about everything from wrestling to life and everything in between. So I hope you guys, when that episode drops, you guys will appreciate it and enjoy it as much as I had fun recording it. But until then, let's get into today's guests. Today, my guest is a pioneer in Queensland Wrestling's women's division. She was one of the first ever friends that I've made inside and outside of that squared circle. And on my first ever training session learning strikes, she knocked me on my ass. She joins me today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my esteemed honor to bring to you Brandy Alexander. Brandy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Flash?
I'm doing well. I have to say I'm doing well because I'm afraid if I give you any other answer, you're going to knock me down again.
Well, that's good. At least you know the truth.
Now, I've recapped on a couple episodes here already, speaking about my journey with the business, speaking about how I got into it, and the friends that I'd made at that time. Now, I referenced at the top of this episode, an introduction just before, that yes, you indeed were one of the first friends I made in wrestling outside of coming in with a guy at the time called Blaze. Do you remember, because I've spoken about this on the podcast, do you remember that dance-off segment and that gigantic, ridiculous, oversized red jacket that I wore into training?
I do. Pretty clearly, actually.
Oh,
I remember thinking, who the hell is this kid? And then I realized you're actually older than me. So, it was interesting.
Yeah, I remember doing that dance-off and the psyche behind me going, hey, you know what? I'm going to come to training. I'm going to join up with Blaze. We're going to fulfill this high school mentality that this high school dream that we had about doing this. So I thought, hey, you know what would be great? I'll jumpstart my friendships in this wrestling world. I've worn this gigantic red jacket into the ring. I'm going to wear it to training. And the look of daggers that I had from the likes of yourself and everyone there at the time was very indescribable. I'll never forget walking into that little side office room of Hawks, Blaze saying, hey, this is my mate James. He wants to join up. To which Hawks spun around, took his glasses off and went, oh, yeah, the fucking dancer. So, yeah, great start. So, Yeah, happy to know that, who the hell's this kid? So, but we've known each other pretty much since 2008. So going on, man, going on
now,
12 years now, yeah. Now, there was a lot of times there where we arguably spent a lot of times doing those shows. There was the transitional phase from the monthly shows when I started. You were already having some momentum. You'd already been established at that point. And then we switched to the weekly shows out of the training facility. Then we changed venues. And then shortly after we changed venues, that was around the time when you had decided to take a leave of absence. However, our friendship didn't stop. We ended up doing work together again in about 2000 and I want to say maybe 2017, and then sporadic appearances since then. But I've always kept in touch with you as best as I could throughout those years. Is it crazy to think back on now that not only has your career lasted such a length of time, give or take, on and off peaks notwithstanding, but to look back and say, man, because you started not 12 years ago, but you started, when was that? Like 2006, 2007?
I think I started in 2006. I was 15 when I started wrestling.
Wow.
Yeah, I went to my first, they used to do like open training sessions and whatnot. Yep. And I would have been 14 at the time. But Hawk told me that I wasn't allowed to come back until I was 15, which is surprising considering in the years after, I'm pretty sure we had 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, all that kind of stuff. So, it's what it is.
So was that, because I've spoken to a few of the guys that were there at the time of the original incarnation of the company when it was starting in 99, 2000, and they were saying that the training was done out the back of, I think it was a sex shop. Was that the training that you had to attend?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
We did actually train next door to a sex shop in which Hawk ran. So he'd just wander out through the little sex shop, and us little kiddies in there, we'd have a look and see the big dildos and adult toys, and I think it opened up a world of possibilities for us,
So at 15, that's going to be not only are you wrestling and sort of fulfilling a childhood dream at that point, but man, you're getting a deep dive experience into the one extreme world to the other.
Yes, yeah, we were.
So how long was it for you? So what made you sign up, actually? What made you get into it? Because obviously it wasn't a case of, I'm going to go to a sex shop. Oh, hey, there's a wrestling school next door. Like,
no.
How did you find out about it, and what drove you to actually considering it and undertaking it?
Interesting question. So I guess probably from the age of about 10, 11, flicking through channels, one day I come across this wrestling show on Foxtel, and I just happened to see these two guys standing in the middle of the ring. One of them wearing like a pretty shocking fake hairpiece, and the other one with long hair.
Yeah.
And I just see this one with long hair spear this guy with the really shit hairpiece, and then pull the hairpiece off.
Right.
And I went, what the hell am I watching?
Yeah.
And like ever since then I was hooked. I loved it. Like it ended up being Kurt Angle versus Edge was what I was watching. Right.
It's around the time where he had his head shaved.
Yes.
Yeah. And how old were you at this point when you had seen this?
I think I was like 11. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So 11-year-old seeing a man de-scalped to the joy of 12,000 people in attendance.
Yes. Yeah. And it was I just thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And then as I kept watching, I did see that there were a couple of girls there. And I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe these absolutely stunning, amazing looking girls were going out there and doing what they were doing. It was insane. Yeah. And anyway, I watched it. I was an avid fan for years, and of course I loved getting on my trampoline and killing my sisters with these with these wrestling moves. 5-star frog splash all the way, Yep. And anyway, so it wasn't until probably I was 14 at the time, so maybe 2015, when correct me if I'm wrong there. Sorry, 2005. Correct me if I'm wrong there. When Eddie Guerrero died.
Yeah, November 2005. Yeah.
So he was one of my absolute favorites. I loved him. I loved Lie, Cheat, Steal. I loved him. And when he died, I was devastated. And I said to myself, I vow I'm going to become a wrestler for Eddie. Because, Eddie cared and everything.
First name basis, texts you all the time. Yeah.
Yep. And my best friend, who also loved wrestling as much as me, and it was actually the reason why we became best friends. Mm-hmm. Bella, what did Pete used to call her? Bella Belima.
Bella. Yeah.
Anyway, she decided she was going to come on this quest with me, and she was going to start wrestling as well. So I Google searched wrestling schools, everything like that, and nothing was coming up on the Gold Coast. Mm-hmm. But things were coming up in Melbourne. And
right.
I remember being 14 and going to my mum, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm dropping out of school and I'm moving to Melbourne. Okay. And I'm gonna live at this training school and I'm gonna wrestle in Melbourne. I'm gonna become a wrestler. And my mum said, "You're a dickhead." And
a lot of faith in that family at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, so we went. My best friend and I just happened to be like talking to people at school about it, and someone turned around to us and said, "Oh, they do live wrestling shows in Southport at the basketball stadium down there."
Yeah.
And I went, "Oh, are you?" Because I was like, "Are you sure it's the right stuff?" And they go, yeah, it's the fake stuff with the chairs and the tables and the junkyard bashes and all that kind of hoo-ha.
Because you were concerned it might have been that Greek Olympic wrestling.
Yes, because Bella and I actually did start doing the Greco-Roman wrestling.
Oh, really? So you started off doing shoot wrestling just for the sake of finding something local?
Yes, we did. Yeah. Just because I thought, Kurt Angle had a background in Olympic wrestling, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a go and see if I'm any good. I was actually really good.
Humble brag.
Yeah, just humble brag right there.
Yeah.
But we were doing that down at our local PCYC until we went and saw our first live wrestling show down at Southport at the basketball stadium. And I loved it. I just couldn't believe it that these guys were out here doing exactly what I wanted to do, and it was only around the corner from me.
So how long was it that you were doing that shoot wrestling? Because I never knew that story. So how long were you doing that with Bella before you went, hey, let's go see this show, and yeah, we're going to transition over to this form of wrestling now?
Well, we started when we were 14. So we probably did it for about 6 months.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Because Bella was also younger than me, and I didn't want to start without her. So I waited until I was till it was halfway through the year, so that Bella turned 15. So on Bella's 15th birthday, or the day before, we went down and we did our first training session where we learned how to bump and everything like that. So on her 15th birthday, when she had everyone over and I'd slept over at her house and everything, we couldn't move.
Yeah. Okay.
So Greco-Roman wrestling really, fitness-wise, it's amazing. But, the wrestling that we do takes the biggest toll on your body. And I was only 15.
Yeah. No, I get that because, it is one of those things. It's arguably, not only does it test your, obviously, emotional and your mental capacity, but without a doubt, physically. And, especially at such a young age. But that didn't deter you, though. It was kind of like, okay, this is what I'm in for.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I felt like I'd done something it was strange, bit masochistic of me, but I was like, I felt like I'd done something exciting with my life and this pain was worth it. And it just made me even more excited to start.
Right. Okay. So you guys have caught the bug. You're there with your best friend. You're starting to learn the ropes, starting to learn the traps. How long was it then? So you spent 6 months doing shoot wrestling, but how long was it then now from training in pro wrestling till you had, or the idea was talked about of you getting on and starting to do shows?
Probably another 6 months from then. So I think I had my first show when I was still 15.
Okay.
At the end of the year. And it was a Rumble.
Right.
So it was at Southport RSL, I'm pretty sure it was. It was the first and only show that particular company had at that venue, as two of the guys decided to get up on top of the bar and started having a hardcore match up there, and we got booted out and were asked to never come back.
Booted out during the show or at the end of the show?
After the show, yep.
Okay, wow. So cool. That's an interesting start. So you've had your debut, and then you're told, "Hey, get out."
Yep, pretty much. Okay. And then from there, we were still at the basketball courts for a little bit, and then we moved to train where the sex shop was.
Oh, okay. So you started doing shows. Wait, did you start doing shows out of that area, or you just started training in that area?
Oh, God, it was so long ago. No, I think you're right. No, I think we did always train out of the sex shop area. But I think after that initial show, we had a very big break before we had another live show. Yeah,
so this would have taken you now to the Bicentennial Center.
Yes, yeah. So the next show we had was at the Bicentennial Center.
Okay.
And it was probably about, I want to say like even 6 months, maybe even a year after that initial show.
Till you were getting out there again and having your then. Yep. Okay, wow. So are you deterred at any point, or are you just committed to say, hey, I want to get on these shows?
No, I wasn't deterred at all. To be totally honest, the shows back then being a show was really cool, but it was also quite stressful at 15.
Yeah.
But I loved training. I thrived on training. Training was just what I lived for. You know, any chance I got to go down there, I was at training. I loved learning from these guys who I idolized. You know, I'd only seen them in a couple of shows, but they were just so amazing. They were getting out there and they were actually living the dream that I wanted to live. Yeah, no,
I share the same sentiments, because those same guys, years later when I was there, and we hang on. Years later, when I was there and we had that reunion show, man, like I had seen the footage of these guys from the Major Impact shows. And then when these guys came in for that reunion show, it was like the damn wrestling Oscars for me. I was like, wow, there's that guy, there's that guy, there's that guy, there's that guy. So I'd been exposed to these matches of these guys and girls long before I ever got to meet them. But to know that not only was I learning from these people, but to then have an opportunity to work alongside them with live events was such a trip. And you're saying you had a similar experience.
Oh, absolutely. I was starstruck from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I didn't have any girls, though, to sort of look up to. When I first started, there was one other girl, but she was in and out with injuries. And she was a fair bit older than myself and Bella. And then we had another young girl who was about my age as well, start up with us too. So there were three of us 15-year-olds, another lady that was 25 in and out, but that was sort of it.
Right. Okay. So it was mainly a lot of the pressure then was, I guess, to starting a consistent, based on what you said, it's starting a consistent women's division. A lot of the invisible, I guess, pressure was put on you and Bella at this point.
Oh, absolutely. And it was because Hawk wanted a women's division.
Right. Okay.
He wanted a women's division and he was going to get that with us.
Was there a conversation that happened that he said, hey, you know, I'm going to put was he starting a women's belt and doing the whole division thing? Or was it just a case of the unspoken rule of like, you girls are fighting, that's the women's division? Or did he actually come to you and say, hey, we're going to be doing this?
No, yeah. I can't actually remember. I don't actually remember a whole bunch of conversation with Pete about what was happening. It kind of was more so a point where you'd rock up at a show and you do the before show meeting and they'd say, all right, you get the belt.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because I remember there was a glass cabinet at the training facility when I joined, and in that cabinet there was a red and yellow belt, and every day it was like, you know, it was like the secret, visualize what you want. And I kept staring at that little belt and I was like, it matches my jacket. And that's as far as it went. I just thought that'd be a cool little prop because it matched my color scheme. And I don't know, I thought it was classy. And then eventually Pete allowed me to use it. It became the Flashmatic Championship. But about maybe a year later, I found out that was technically the rookie and or possibly the female belt at the time. Was that belt in existence when you were there, or was that just sort of not showcased at all?
Yeah, I think it was. I think that was actually my first ever women's belt, because you want to know why?
Oh, really? Okay.
I used to hate that belt.
Yeah.
I couldn't fit the damn thing around my waist.
Yeah. I did not have that problem. I was,
yes. I'm sure it was built specifically for you.
Yeah, many moons before I joined, there was a vision in place being like, this 4'10", 18-year-old will come in here and he'll wear this with pride because his jacket will match the color scheme. Let's make it.
Exactly.
So that belt was in existence. That was the first championship that you had won. How long was it? Do you remember what year it was or how long into your career? Because you said from that Rumble to changing venues to having technically your second match, but your first singles match, I assume with Bella, it was about a year. So are we in 2007 now?
I think so, yeah. And I think if memory serves me correct, you might have to ask a few other people to verify this, but I'm pretty sure I won it that first show.
Oh, okay. So it was a case of, hey, we're going to kickstart it right now.
I think so.
Yeah,
I have a feeling that's how it happened. And if it wasn't that first show, it was within that first few months of starting the live shows.
Right. Okay. So what's the process like now? So you're the women's champion of the division at the moment. The division exists of you and Bella and some variables depending on life circumstances, whatever's going on. Did the women's division gain some stability after this point, or was it still sort of fluctuating month to month?
It had the stability. It just didn't have the size. Mm-hmm. So again, myself and Bella, we would go in massive feuds for months at a time, and which was actually really cool. Like a lot of people don't enjoy wrestling the same person for months on end. You know, they say, oh, it's boring and you can't do this and you can't do that. But we had some excellent trainers with us, and we found that every match we did had something different to it. Mm. And we just knew each other so well that it didn't matter how many times we went out there and wrestled. We just came up with something different because we knew each other so well. We didn't pre-plan matches.
Right. Yeah.
We knew what was happening at the end.
Yeah.
We talked about what we'd do at the beginning, and then we made it up in the ring as we went. Right. It was always something different. Yeah.
Did your friendship grow stronger from this team because you had that familiarity, because you had the consistency of fighting each other every month? Did your friendship sort of flourish from that?
Oh, it did, but it also was very isolating. So again, remember that at 15, 16 years of age, you know, we were still at high school. Mm-hmm. We still had studies to do and homework and assignments, and we still had other friends that didn't really sort of understand what we were doing. So, you know, there was a period there where at lunchtime we would just sit, just us two, and just talk about wrestling nonstop.
Right. Okay.
And then it sort of alienated us from our other friends a little bit, until we sort of tried to start including them and bringing them along to shows and showing them what we do. They still were a bit like, what the fuck is this? But at least they knew what we were talking about.
Yeah. And was schooling like that a lot for you growing up? Was it very like an isolating time, or were you like just feeling isolated because, hey, we're doing wrestling and these other guys don't get it, but we do?
No. So one of the first things I remember hearing when I first rocked up to IPW was someone turned around and said to us, welcome, fellow misfits. This is where the misfits live. Right. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, it's kind of true. Like, you know, I went to 13 different schools. I had lived all over Australia. I'd always been a little bit of an outsider. And Bella was the same. So for the first time ever, it was a place where we really felt ourselves, and we really felt we could, you know, be who we were. Yeah. Yeah. What 13 different schools? You traveled all around Australia. Put a pause in the career for a second. Mm-hmm. Why were you traveling so much? And obviously the schools were based in the travel, but why was it you were traveling so much? To be totally honest, I've got no idea. Okay. I just remember we started up here in Queensland, on the Gold Coast, and I remember my mum moving myself and my sister across the Nullarbor down to Western Australia, or across to Western Australia. Right. And then I think we just slowly sort of made our way back. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know why she moved around so much, but eventually we moved our way back up here for me to start high school. But yeah, so it did include a lot of changing schools, a lot of uncertainty as to where I would be. Not even every year, every 6 months,
right?
And whatnot. So yeah, I was kind of always a bit of an outsider.
So starting wrestling with Bella, you guys are pretty much beating yourself up consistently each and every month now. You're feeling a bit isolated, but knowing that you had to travel around so much or had that experience from traveling around so much as growing up as a kid and obviously developing those friendships at school only to go, hey, don't worry, we got another 13 more to go. Were you sort of hesitant now with this school before you had met Bella, or was this a case of, hey, I'm exposed to the fact and I'm just going to make friends because I really don't care either way if I move or if I stay?
Yeah, it's I thought we were pretty settled on the Gold Coast.
Okay.
So I was kind of at the age where I said I wasn't moving. Like I wasn't going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I had found Bella. So before that, you've got you have friends and everything like that, but you find that one person or that couple of people that you're going to be friends with for life, and she was just one of them.
Yeah.
And just wrestling, like we hated each other when we first met each other.
Really?
Oh, hated each other.
Why was that? Was it just a case of like, I don't think I'm ever going to get along with this person, or?
I don't know what it was. I think she had a really, really strong fuck off vibe. Anyone that's met Bella knows, like, if she's looking at you like that, run away.
Yeah.
And I think I just had a bit of a fucking attitude at school, to be honest. So, she had this big mop of hair that was curly and brown, and I used to go around calling her Hagrid.
Okay. Yeah.
And she used to want to punch my head in. And then it just so happened that one day I was sitting in class with one of the boys talking about wrestling, and she's like, I love wrestling. And that's just how our friendship developed.
Right. So the power of wrestling sort of overcame the schoolyard bullying as it was.
It did. And yes, I am ashamed to say that I was the bully in that case.
Because Bella's not your average height for a girl. She's a lot taller.
Yep.
So I guess that's where the origin of the Hagrid comment came in. Tall and brown shaggy hair. Yep. Wow. Okay. You heard it here first. Brandy's best friend was insulted on the playground from day one. Friendships for life. All right. So you've established the friendship. You've now solidified yourself. You're not moving from the Gold Coast. You and Bella are friends through the power of wrestling. You guys start training together. You have matches together. You get crowned the champion. You're going month to month now. The women's division develops a bit of stability now. We're pretty much hitting into 2008 now.
Yep.
This is around the time when I think I joined middle of the year. I did that dance-off segment. I came in, and this was a very weird transitional period for me because I had only seen that one show. I guess similar to you, coming down and seeing that one show and being like, yeah, look, I'm hooked, sign me up. I'd come in, I'd always been a fan of wrestling. I'd seen my friend Blaze debut against Ash. I thought, this is insane. I've got to do this. I've got to fulfill the high school dream, as it would be, that we would always do this. I signed up. I idiotically wore that gigantic red jumper to training because I thought, I'm cool. Nope. I got daggers in the eyes for that. Hypothetically, not literally, because that would have been painful. But that was a period of time there where I started to become friends with not only you, but Bella as well. And true story, I remember learning and having you become one of my first friends involved in wrestling. But I also remember being paired up with you. I think it was because of like a height thing, like, all right, everyone of equal height, go and train, like that old thing. And yep. Yeah, we locked up, and yeah, I just remember you were really, I remember you being really intense and committed to it at that point. I don't know if that belt was still in existence at that point. I don't know if we transitioned over to, I think you got a black and silver one. I can't remember, but yeah, I remember meeting you and, yeah, having a similar experiences to you upon training where I was like, yeah, this hurts, but man, it was just something about that place, and it's had such a family vibe. And do you remember me coming in and starting to train with you? Like, do you remember these times, like we had that new training facility down there?
Yes, I do. So at that stage, I'm pretty sure at that stage I was very committed to wrestling. So Hawk lived above that training place. So he would open training every day. So training, he would just open it up to anyone that wanted to come in, and I was there 4 or 5 times a week in the afternoon. If I wasn't rolling around the ring or practicing wrestling on myself, you know, someone else would rock up. I know Blaze would rock up pretty regularly.
Yep.
And we do a lot of one-on-one stuff with, because, you know, like how many people rock up 5 days a week, you know? Maybe on a Tuesday or a Thursday you'd have 10 people, but most of the time it was only a couple. So it was really, really rewarding to be able to go in every day and really train hard. And I was so focused, not so much on, see, this is the thing. I wasn't focused on making something of myself and wanting to leave and go overseas and everything like that, because I didn't have that kind of vision. I was just focused on being able to go out there and wrestle with these people that I admired for their skill. I wanted to be able to keep up. So when you started, I guess the thing is being a women's wrestler back in the day, not now, because now the divisions are just insane. Like the girls are crazy these days. They're so amazing. I've never seen so much talent ever before than what I'm seeing in this day and age for women. Yeah. But back in the day, I only really had Trish Stratus and Lita to look up to. And in hindsight, you know, they were great for back then, but they're nothing now. Yeah. Nothing compared to the talent that's out there. So I really felt I had something to prove with not just being another diva. I didn't want to be a diva. I wanted to be a wrestler. And when I saw you come in, I kind of thought,
he's a diva.
Absolutely. What a diva. And his big red jacket. What a dickhead. Yeah. No, I kind of thought, no, okay, if this guy wants to come in here and he wants to be with us and he wants to train with us and then he wants to do shows with us, he needs to prove that he can actually handle it. Yeah. So I was never the nicest to the rookies and the trainees and everything like that, because I always felt, not that you had to prove yourself, but I wanted to see that you actually wanted to be there. Had you have turned around after you did a training session with me where I was quite stiff or where I was quite hard on you and I'd turn around and say, "Have a fuck up." Yeah. Had you have walked away from that and gone to Pete or gone to someone else and been like, "Oh, I don't really want to like train with Brandy anymore," or you'd gone, "Oh, it was a bit hard, rah." I would have instantly gone, he's not for this business. He's not for this business. Yeah. No, you were always stern, but you were fair. It was from the school of tough love, but it wasn't anything that either you yourself had gone through or you yourself wouldn't put yourself through. Yes, exactly. And that's how I felt. Like there are a lot of stories that I've heard sort of like coming back into wrestling now where, you know, some of the girls that were in and out of the business back then when I was training and everything like that said that they stopped wrestling because I was too stiff or I was too hard on them or anything like that. And to them I say, well, the fuck were you doing in there? Right. Okay. Yeah, it is a strange, wrestling is something that I think a lot of people, they see it on TV and they go, yeah, like I want to do this. But those bumps, like we've established throughout this whole conversation thus far, those bumps are really killer, especially the first one. I think at that point we had just sort of on the cusp of friendship. It was like a familiarity thing. It wasn't like a case of, oh, I'm going to go and hang out with her or go see a movie or anything like that. But it was from that, I think I was starting to earn your respect, which then blossomed into a friendship. But at this stage, I'm doing the basics with you. I'm learning the strikes. I'm learning the sort of mechanics of it all. And then I get in that ring, and there was a time period there where it was like
I don't ever want to be wrestling. I always just envisioned myself and kind of limited myself only to just doing managerial stuff because I felt almost like I would insult the guys that were down there by saying, yeah, I want to wrestle, because I didn't think I at that time had a place there. And that's not from anyone's perception or anything that anyone did towards me. I want to make that clear. No one made me feel that way. That was just in my own head at the time. But I remember taking those first bumps, and I remember having my come to Jesus moment where you flat back bump, you go, oh God, and you go, yeah, come to Jesus moment. But sometimes those people that are really passionate about doing it take that first bump, and yeah, they end up having those conversations with people going, oh man, that sucked, and I didn't realize it was this hard. And so you were saying, like, you know, if it's either go hard or go home for you at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand, especially with one of the girls that was older than me. Yeah. I couldn't understand why there was the constant bitching and the constant tears and the constant just her trying to make me look bad or feel bad when I was just doing what Hawk had taught me to do. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So did that sort of isolate you even more? Because I know you said that you and Bella felt isolated because of your love of wrestling. You had the friendship there. No one else get it. But now you're seeing other female wrestlers. Are you feeling more isolate now of the fact of these girls having a different reaction to you? Or was it a case of just black and white? Like, this is what wrestling is. I don't know why you're doing this.
No, and it was very black and white for me. It was very black and white. And there were a lot of people in the wrestling community who would say, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Like, they'd say men have this issue as well. They've got the men that have this issue too. So it's not just a women's thing. It's just, I don't know. It's, for me, I just never understood. Like, I never understood why they were here. Did they think it was fully fake? Did they think that you weren't going to cop any knocks? Did they think that the mat didn't hurt when you landed on it, or the ropes didn't leave you with bruises down your side from running them so much?
Yeah.
Did they think that coming off the top rope was going to feel like landing on pillows? Like, I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people, from what I could gather, especially at that time, a lot of people presumed that wrestling, and some may even still do now, but the business has changed in a lot of ways. So hopefully not the same way. But back then, definitely a lot of people probably felt that ring, because of the way that, you know, that ring was structured and built, a lot of people probably thought, hey, this ring's got a spring in it. But man, you pull that apron back, you take off those side skirts, there ain't nothing but metal and wood in that ring. There is no spring at all. So that probably is why people went, oh yeah, you know, wrestling looks fun. It looks like it's spongy and it'll absorb it. That ain't the case. It was structured and designed in a way that all the metal would take the impact at once, therefore relieving the tension across the board and I guess giving the longevity to the ring at that point, not causing any structural damage. But no, there was no spring in that ring at all.
And I'll tell you, like, I don't know about you, but especially the IPW ring, because it was the only ring I'd ever known. The first ring I wrestled in, and the only ring I wrestled in for a long time. Mm-hmm. But the harder you hit, the softer it was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
If you came off the top rope and you landed doing a splash or you landed doing anything, I found the impact so much less absorbing in my body. So much more absorbing in my body than like if I just walked up and would take a normal bump.
Yeah.
I'd walk up sometimes and take a normal bump, and that spring just wouldn't move. It wasn't enough to make it move, and then you go, oh God.
See, that was such a weird thing to be told by the trainers at that time, to say, hey, you know, hit that mat, brace for impact. The harder you hit it, the less it's going to hurt. And I'm thinking, no, the harder I hit it, the harder it's going to hurt. Like I couldn't comprehend, like, more is less. I've always heard the mantra of less is more. So I'm going like, meh. Like I'm trying to do these initial first day bumps, to which you laughed and shook your head. But I'm going like, like I'm almost rocking back. Like, oh, I did one, and it's like, no, you just literally just rocked back. You were squatting and you just sort of like rocked back like an old grandma chair about to give its last legs. Like it was terrible.
Because even at the best of times, Flash, you got to be taking a big bump or that ring won't move. And you you were hilarious. You were so funny because you'd land on it like a feather and it just would not move.
I don't weigh much more than a feather. I was hitting that mat. I think even Hawk got up me. He's like, attack the mat. And I'm like, I'm trying.
Yeah.
Was that a weird thing to be told as well when you were starting, like to have that mantra? Because it is that saying, less is more, but now you're being told more is less. Was that a weird concept initially to understand?
It wasn't for me, just because I did have a background in judo. So I did competitive judo from 11 until I was about 14. And then at the end, when I was 14 and a half was when we started amateur wrestling, where they do break falls as well. So throughout that whole time, I'd known how to do a break fall. I know how to slap the mat, even if they're not, even if it's not a wrestling mat, like to slap normal mats and stuff like that and break my fall. So for me, it wasn't hard, but I know for Bella, she really, really struggled getting the concept.
Yeah. It is that weird thing with when you start wrestling of, I believe I've always dubbed it the survival mechanic, where the first time you're doing those bumps, there is something in your brain which isn't a freak, but it's that voice going, excuse me, we don't like throwing ourselves towards the floor at this point in time, so we're gonna put in like the safety emergency system, which is basically you're not doing this. So there is like the back bumps weren't so bad once you sort of got the initial run through, like, hey, yeah, okay, this is kind of good. And the front bumps, the way they were described to me and the way it was acted out, I think I don't know why, but I felt a lot more comfortable doing that. But hey, everyone's different. Like some people didn't do the back bumps. Some of them excelled at them. Some of them didn't like doing the front bumps. Again, some of them excelled at them. Flip bumps for me were always like, man, can I sit this one out for a long time? And I don't know why it was. I think it must have just been the scariest sort of bump for me at that stage. But given your background pretty much in contact sport at that time, was there any of those bumps for you that were like, yeah, this sucks, like it was hard for you to do, or given your background, it was like, this is easy?
No, I actually got all those bumps pretty much first go round. Again, I had been doing those for years, including the flip bump. They still do that in judo. We'd done it at wrestling and at Greco-Roman wrestling and everything like that. So that wasn't so hard for me. Again, I say though, there were so many people that took not even weeks, but months and months to learn how to properly do a flip bump. And then eventually some people would just roll. They just roll on the ground and do a bump, which was fine. But I also found that for the people that struggled, it is really, really confronting to be standing there in front of a group of other trainees, whether you're a man, a woman, a boy or a girl at this stage, anything. It is really confronting to be standing in front of a room of people and be failing at something that you're terrified of doing. So it was always nice when the trainers would make you do activities, right, that would include those kind of bumps in them without you even thinking about it.
Yep.
So it was like, you walk into the middle of the ring and someone would sweep your leg, and that's how you would do a back bump. Or you'd walk into the middle of the ring and someone would do a drop toe hold, which is how you did a front one. Or someone would throw you at the ropes and then do a hip toss, which is how a lot of people actually learn how to do flip bumps, especially the bigger guys. Yeah.
It is one of those things where they developed that mantra on those exercises though that allowed not only yourself to sort of feel comfortable and gain confidence in the ring, but also have that almost like a supportive exterior family kind of vibe to it, where it wasn't critiqued so hard because it wasn't all in due fun, but it was enough there to have that, to build camaraderie and a friendship, so that when it came time to seemingly be judged on whatever move or reenacting whatever sequence or learning a different move or a transition in front of your then strangers, it's now feeling a bit more comfortable because they're not strangers, but they're starting to become like your friends.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like they were, and they were a family, and they were friends that only, someone in wrestling can understand. It's so strange because wrestling is such an isolated sport. It's not like rugby where you go and play with 15 other guys, and then when you're out on the field, you play against another 15 other guys, and you do that week in and week out. So you meet hundreds of people that love rugby and, everything like that. You don't do that. There's not actually that many wrestlers out there.
Yeah.
So it is, I believe it is a very isolating kind of sport, but once you break into it and you meet people, they're genuinely some of the best people you'll ever meet in your life.
Yeah, it is. Once you crack that mold, and like I said at the top of this podcast, I've known you for 12 years, but I had to go through that process to knowing you, which was like complete stranger, had those camaraderie moments, built that friendship. But speaking of friendship, though, it's around this time, heading in from 2008 to 2009, where there's a lot of fluctuations, a lot of changes in the women's division. And now at this point, the person you started with, your best friend, the one person you could always talk to, not only about life, but wrestling, Bella starts having on and off show periods there where she is there for a couple months, then she takes a few months off and come back and things like that. What was the reasons? Do you remember why? Was she just getting injured a bit then, or getting a bit hurt and needed the time to heal? Or
I think it was a little bit of everything. So at that time we were 17, turning 18. So we were still very young. I had dropped out of school in year 11 to start doing a chef's apprenticeship. But Bella was still at school, so Bella was then preparing for her final exams at school. So she didn't have a lot of time to train, and I love Hawk and everything like that, but he always tended to have a couple of people that he needed to niggle at, to pick on, and at that time she just happened to be that one. He'd say she was lazy, and she, if she wanted to be on shows, she needed to show that she was actually wanted to be there and everything. And it wasn't that she didn't want to be there. She just had other things going on in her life. On top of that, we had friends that were already 18. They wanted to start partying. They wanted to do that kind of stuff. And it's really hard to fit wrestling around that.
Yeah.
So I guess it was just a whole bunch of things. I think she also, she had, she had a love interest at wrestling that didn't really pan out. So I think she lost a lot of love for the industry when she lost her love for that person.
Right. Okay. What was it like for you though? Because you're now at that point where nothing has hindered the friendship, and she's not mad at the industry so much as to say, screw this, I'm out of here. It's just, hey,
I say she was a little bit disillusioned with the industry.
Okay.
I think she was more so then when you're in year 12 and and they're telling you that you need to be studying you need to choose what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I mean, I know you don't, but at the time you really think you do.
Yeah.
And I think she was like, well, wrestling's not going to pay my bills. Wrestling's not going to, it's not going to put food on the table. It's something I do for fun. So she really had to prioritize what wrestling was in her life. And at that time, her exams were just more important.
Right. Yeah. I mean, life happens, man. Sometimes these situations in life ultimately override the rule of wrestling. There is that uncardinal rule of wrestling of sometimes you got to put the business first. A lot of the times you got to put the business first. You can miss out on weddings and birthdays and anniversaries and those important life moments, because that is what entails and that is what is needed in the industry. But there are times similar to what you guys were going through, especially coming up through the high school, where, hey, man, I gotta finish off my schooling degree, and that's what was happening for her at that point. But for you, having that companionship not only at school, but having the fluctuating feelings as well of being like, hey, I'm going to start this apprenticeship. Are you starting to feel a little bit disdained with wrestling at this point? Because the psyche with the women's division changed at this point, right? You got sort of by default put with the guys.
Yes, it did. So we ended up. So at the time, I'm pretty sure I was the only female wrestler
Right.
that was fully there. And I mean, this was after I'd already had a break from wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'd gone away. I'd dated someone in the wrestling sort of circuit since the age of 15.
Okay.
And,
yep.
you know, like, I think that was very detrimental in a way, because all my thoughts as a 15-year-old girl were on this boy.
Right.
You know, like I was wrestling and everything like that, but I loved it also because, you know, this love of my life, my everything was a wrestler as well.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't, I guess my focus was split. Anyway, this guy, there was a couple of companies coming out at the time, like a couple of splits between IPW and the wrestlers there who decided to leave and start their own company. You know,
yep.
all well and good. Everything was all fine. A couple of months later, the guy I start dating turns around and says, "Oh, I want to jump across to this other group," because he thought they would be better.
Yep.
And I said, okay, well, and when we went in to tell Hawk at IPW and everything like that, we walked in and we had our belts with us because I was the women's champion and this other dude was, I don't know, something else. Don't even know what he was. And Hawk just said to us, "Get out. Drop the belts and get out." And
right.
he knew, and he didn't want a bar of it. So he said, "Leave." So we did. And I ended up moving in with this guy and his family.
Okay.
I think I was 16 at the time. And I started my chef's apprenticeship up there while I was with him, and we were going to start going to this other company. Anyway, sure enough, we break up.
Right. Yeah.
Before our first training session with this new company.
Right. Okay.
And so we rock up to this training session together, but not together.
Right. Okay.
And my head just, like, I thought I would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And because they asked us at this other company, they're like, "Oh, do you guys mind if we split you up and put you in different factions?"
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's all like, "Oh, yeah. We're not even together anymore. You know, I'm seeing this new bird, rah, rah, rah." And it just kind of devastated me that I was like, "Why the fuck am I here?"
Yeah.
And I remember at that point going, God, like, and I even had one of the guy that started it turn around to me and go, "If you want to stay. I'd rather have you here than him."
Yeah.
Because, you know, they needed women. They needed a women's division.
Mm.
And I said, no, I've got to go back down to the coast, or I've got to do whatever I need to do to sort of sort my life out and get myself out of this guy's house. And anyway, I ended up staying up in Brisbane with someone else who I was working with in my chef's apprenticeship. But the chef said, "If you're going to be working here, you can't have weekends off. You know, chefing is split shifts, so it's nighttime work. So you can't go to training, and you can't have Saturdays off because Saturdays are our biggest days." So I stopped wrestling there for a little bit.
Okay.
And then when I decided I'd had enough of that, I decided I just couldn't do it anymore. I moved back down to the coast, and I walked into Wardour Street where we trained.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a match with Bella after not being in the ring for months and months and months. And I remember between us turning around and saying, "That's magic. That's just pure magic."
Right.
He goes, that is what a women's match should look like.
Wow. Okay. And this was at training?
And this was at training. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So you've come back after having that time away. So is this now at the end of 2017, middle of 2018? Oh, sorry, 2000. Is this now at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008?
I think it was the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. So then, you know, because Bella was still wrestling at the time. So then, you know, fast forward a little bit to after Bella left, and I was training 5 days a week. Still, I think at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, were we still at the Bicentennial Centre, or were we doing weekly shows?
I think we're heading into 2008. We were definitely still there, and I think it was towards the end, if not beginning of 2009, that we transitioned over to doing them out of the training facility.
Yeah. So I mean, to go from the Bicentennial Centre, which I thought was a pretty amazing venue, to the shed was a really hard transition, I found.
Okay.
I felt very backyardish. We were getting crowds of like 10 people that were mainly just family members in the beginning, and I just found the whole thing a bit yuck, to be honest. And I think I started to become very disillusioned then.
Right. Because those kind of shows, like, they kind of tested all of us in the sense of, like, you got to cut your teeth. Sometimes you get crowd numbers like that. Sometimes it is 300 people. Other times it is 10. But it's that old mantra of, like, you go out there and give the show no matter what the crowd number is. Could be 10,
Absolutely.
Could be 10,000.
And I'll be totally honest, I gave some of my best performances in that little friggin' shed.
But these shows out of the training facility kind of tested everyone to cut their teeth, because it was that old mantra of, hey, it doesn't matter the crowd size. You got to give that same performance each and every time. But for you specifically, you also went through a bit of a character reinvention at this point. Was this because you just wanted to test the waters and see what you wanted to do? Or was this to do with the fact that, hey, Bella's not here, that old version of my character kind of does things with her, I'm going to change it up and see what I can get?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of everything. So I think I was a little bit bored at the time. I also, I wanted, like, they say wrestling, it's quite a creative outlet for people, and an outlet just in general. And, I really didn't like the change into just working out of the shed. I really didn't like the fact that Bella had left and there was no women's division at all. There was a couple of trainees coming up, but nothing, solid. And I think I just let my frustrations out in the form of changing my character and turn that disgust at working in the shed to disgust at the crowd. Right.
Okay. So you went from being what were you, like, you were the sort of rocker chick with the headbands and coming out to Offspring, and now you're sort of like this complete 180. You're just like, no, I'm not going to stand for this kind of things. And you had a really big career reinvention at this point, but you get into the stage now where you've redeveloped your character, but this is also the time when everything gets pumped on the brakes, both personally and professionally at this point. There's a time there where, you had left the company. And this wasn't a case of, being led astray by people that you were dating in the industry at that point, other federations rocking up. At this point in your career, you're having the resurgence, you've got the new character, you're really diving into this alternate persona of your original character, this 180, and now it's a case of, all right, I'm out of here.
Well, not necessarily. So there is a little bit of a story behind that massive break that I had from wrestling. Like I said, at the time, we had a couple of young trainee girls, and I'm talking young. They were like 12-year-olds. And Hawk had turned around and said, I'm going to separate the boys from girls. We're going to have a girls training night and we're going to have a boys training night, and there's going to be no they're not going to train together. You're just going to train separately.
Yeah.
And I didn't agree with this. And when I didn't agree with Hawk, I always made it quite known. And I made it quite known that I didn't agree with it, that I didn't like the fact that he wanted to separate us from the boys. I said that's how I got to be the way I was.
Right.
Was by training with the boys. Not so much boys, but by training with everyone and not limiting who I trained with. And he had this idea in his head that the girls were only going to train with girls, and that was it. And so we had quite a large fight at training one night, and I walked outside to get some fresh air, and he followed me out. And we were having a screaming match in the car park, and then he told me to get out. He told me to leave, and I did. And that was it. Like, I think I'd had enough by that point, and I just said, no, I'm just not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Again, I was on the verge of turning 18. I had other things in my life other than wrestling as well. I had friends that wanted to go out and everything like that. And I think I just went, well, we took a massive step back, and we started, doing shows in this shed for very little crowds, week after week after week. It wasn't like we had a massive 300-person crowd one week or a 150 crowd one week, and then we had 10 people. We consistently had 10 people one week, 10 people the next week.
Yeah.
And I just had enough. And I just went, this isn't what I kind of, this isn't what I kind of gave up my chef's apprenticeship for. This wasn't kind of what I had envisioned.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I've got to do something else.
Yeah. Okay. So now that was pretty much, what would you say that was? That was like maybe the end of 2009 for you?
I think so, yeah. Yeah,
because I don't remember that argument, but I remember because, we were still obviously, and to this day, still friends at that time. I remember the situation had went down because I said, hey, I think I rang you or I messaged you or did something, and I said, hey, like, are you at training today? And you went, no, I've quit. And that hearing, I was like, what? Like, I started having flashbacks to like Blaze and Fury leaving, and now I'm like, man, one of my first people I ever met in this business, now she's left. But I never really pushed the fact and never really asked the issue of like what went down, what happened. You just sort of said, no, I just don't want to be there right now. And, you were professional in that aspect, although like probably inside you were screaming, and I guess, in reality you were screaming as well. But I'm sure internally walking away from that, considering how much passion and energy you'd put in for those last 4 years, or 3 or 4 years at that point, that must have felt like, how were you feeling at that point? Was it a case of, well, now what the hell do I do? Or did you hate wrestling, like every form of it?
I think I did. I think I went through this stage where I kind of blamed wrestling for everything that went wrong in my life. Like all my friends were graduating from high school and I didn't graduate. All my friends were, starting uni, but I couldn't do that because I didn't graduate high school. All my other friends were sort of moving on with their lives, and I was sitting here just hating this sport that I'd done since I was 15.
All right, you guys, we're going to hit the pause button with Brandy Alexander right there. I know, such a bastard thing to do. Hey, if you haven't already, please follow the page on Facebook, Little Man Big Conversations, on Instagram, LMBC Podcast, and on Twitter, LMBC_podcast. Don't fret, part 2 will be dropping real quick. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.